In February 2021, Texas experienced a grid collapse during a cold snap. Temperatures dropped to -2 degrees Fahrenheit in Dallas. Within 48 hours, 4.5 million homes lost power. Pipes froze and burst. Families huddled in cars for warmth. The state's infrastructure, optimized for air conditioning and summer peak loads, failed catastrophically when subjected to sustained cold. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles north in Alaska's interior, homesteaders sat in cabins heated to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, while outside temperatures reached -40 degrees Fahrenheit. No grid connection, no natural gas line, no utility trucks are coming to restore service. While Texas homes were designed to pump heat fast enough to overcome constant leakage, Alaskan cabins were engineered to trap every BTU generated. One system assumed a continuous supply. The other assumed failure and planned for it. Off-grid homesteading at -40 degrees Fahrenheit requires 5 interlocking systems. The building envelope traps heat. The wood stove generates it. Water must be acquired and stored without freezing. The human body must sustain high-calorie intake during strenuous labor in extreme cold. Equipment must function after cold soaking for hours. Each system operates independently. If the generator dies, the wood stove continues passively. If the water line freezes, you haul from the ice hole. If the chainsaw won't start, you split by hand. Modern grid homes couple everything to electricity. The furnace needs power to ignite and circulate air. The water pump needs power to pressurize lines. The thermostat needs power to regulate temperature. When the grid drops, all systems fail simultaneously. Off-grid cabins decouple these dependencies. The wood stove operates without electricity, so a dead battery bank means switching from LED bulbs to oil lamps, not freezing. Water stored in 55-gallon drums inside the heated envelope continues to supply the household even if the ice hole refreezes. The composting toilet functions without pressurized water or sewage lines. Grid dependency creates cascading failure. Decoupled systems create graceful degradation. You pay the cost in daily manual labor. Hauling 15 gallons of water means moving 125 pounds through snow at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. At a MET value of 8.0 for heavy load carrying, plus the metabolic tax of cold exposure, a single water haul burns 600 to 800 calories in 1 hour. Chopping and splitting wood for the evening fire adds another 400 to 600 calories. The active homesteader burns 4,500 to 6,000 calories per day. High-fat foods become essential. Fat delivers 9 kilocalories per gram versus 4 for carbohydrates. Sticks of butter, moose fat, and heavy oils are dietary staples, not indulgences. Lean meat-only diets risk protein poisoning, historically called rabbit starvation. The human engine must be fueled correctly or it fails. The daily routine is dictated by thermal cycles. Wake at 7 o'clock to a cabin cooled to 60 degrees Fahrenheit if the fire was banked properly. Restoke the stove immediately. By 9 o'clock, the water chores begin. Chip out the ice hole, haul 10 to 15 gallons via sled. By 10 o'clock, wood management, bucking frozen rounds into stove-length pieces, splitting them for evening use. Wood frozen at -30 degrees Fahrenheit splits cleanly but is hard on axe edges. Rounds are brought inside to thaw so they burn efficiently. By noon, solar panels need snow cleared. By 1400, maintenance, greasing frozen fittings, inspecting the chimney for creosote buildup. Sunset arrives by 1600 in deep winter. By 2100, the critical ritual, banking the fire for overnight survival. Each task is a controlled energy transaction. Grid homes hide these costs behind electric pumps and natural gas lines. Off-grid life makes energy economics visible. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit outside and +70 degrees Fahrenheit inside, the temperature differential is 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat migrates from warm to cold through conduction, convection, and radiation. The larger the temperature difference, the faster the migration. Off-grid cabins in Alaska's interior require R40 walls, R60 ceilings, and R30 floors. Standard US residential building codes mandate R19 walls and R38 ceilings. These values work in climates where winter lows rarely drop below 0 degrees. peat and furnaces can pump heat continuously. When fuel must be hand-harvested with a chainsaw, hauled on a sled, split with an axe, and burned in a single wood stove, poor insulation becomes a heat hemorrhage. A cord of paper birch delivers 23 to 24 million BTUs. White spruce, more common but inferior, delivers only 17 million BTUs per cord. To get equivalent heat, you must harvest, haul, chop, and stack 30% more spruce. That extra volume multiplies across a 6-month winter. The body is the harvest engine. Every additional cord means additional hours at -40 degrees Fahrenheit wielding a chainsaw, more trips hauling rounds on a sled, more hours splitting frozen wood. The choice between birch and spruce is metabolic economics. The homesteader who burns spruce pays a 30% labor tax all winter long. Ceilings require even higher R values because heat rises. A poorly insulated roof is the primary heat loss point in any structure. At R38, a ceiling at -40 degrees Fahrenheit loses approximately 3,200 British thermal units per hour per 100 square feet. At R60, that loss drops to roughly 2,000 BTUs per hour. The difference is 1,200 BTUs per hour. Over a week, that equals burning an additional 40 pounds of birch. Over a winter, it is half a cord of wood wasted into the atmosphere. Modern homes mask thermal inefficiency with raw energy input. Off-grid cabins cannot. A thick parka filled with down offers no warmth if the zipper is open. Insulation slows conductive heat loss, but air leaks allow convective heat loss through bulk air movement. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, a 1/8 inch gap under a door can drop cabin temperature by 10 degrees Fahrenheit in 1 hour during a windstorm. The mechanism is the stack effect. Hot air inside the cabin rises and creates low pressure at floor level. Cold air outside is pulled through any crack to equalize pressure. The cabin becomes a chimney, exhausting heat constantly. A drafty cabin means waking up every 2 hours to feed the stove. It means burning an extra half cord of wood per month. Arctic entries solve this. An Arctic entry is a double-door airlock system, a small mudroom between the outside door and the interior door. When you enter from outside, you open the exterior door, step into the buffer zone, close the exterior door, and then open the interior door. The cold air brought in with you is trapped in the mudroom, not the living space. Without this buffer, opening a door in a -40 degrees Fahrenheit windstorm causes a whoosh of heat loss as the warm air bubble inside the cabin is displaced by a surge of cold air. The Arctic entry prevents this pressure equalization event from reaching the heated core. Grid homes lose heat through poorly sealed doors and windows, but the furnace compensates by running more frequently. Off-grid homesteaders feel every air leak as stolen sleep and stolen calories. Warm air holds more moisture than cold air. Inside a heated cabin at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the air contains water vapor from cooking, breathing, and washing. This moisture-laden air migrates outward through the wall assembly, driven by vapor pressure differential. As the air moves through the insulation and encounters progressively colder temperatures, it reaches the dew point, the temperature at which water vapor condenses into liquid. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, this dew point occurs inside the wall cavity itself. When water vapor condenses on the cold side of the insulation, it freezes. Ice is a thermal conductor. A wall designed to be R40 can become R5 overnight if the insulation becomes saturated with ice. The solution is a 6 ml polyethylene vapor barrier installed on the warm side of the insulation, the interior face of the wall. This sheet of plastic stops water vapor from entering the wall assembly. Without it, moisture migrates freely, condenses, freezes, and destroys the thermal performance of the insulation. Modern construction in temperate climates often skips proper vapor barrier installation or uses permeable materials that allow some moisture transmission. Grid heating can brute force through the efficiency loss. Off-grid cabins cannot afford invisible thermal failures. If your walls lose R value due to interstitial ice buildup, you burn more wood. If you burn more wood, you must harvest more wood. If you cannot harvest enough wood, you freeze. A standard 2x6 stud wall filled with fiberglass insulation achieves approximately R19. The fiberglass itself has an R value of about 3.5 per inch, so a 5.5-inch cavity should theoretically provide R19. But the wood studs that frame the wall conduct heat. Wood has an R value of only 1.4 per inch. Every 16 inches, a wood stud creates a thermal bridge, a direct conductive pathway from the warm interior to the cold exterior that bypasses the insulation. Heat flows through the path of least resistance. These thermal bridges reduce the effective R value of the entire wall assembly by 10 to 15%. Off-grid cabins eliminate thermal bridging with double wall construction. Two separate 2x4 stud walls are built 12 inches apart. The inner wall is structural and bears the roof load. The outer wall is non-structural and holds the exterior sheathing and siding. The 12-inch gap between the two walls is filled with dense packed cellulose or fiberglass insulation. Because the studs of the inner wall do not touch the studs of the outer wall, there is no direct conductive pathway. The thermal bridge is broken. This achieves R40 or higher with no weak points. The construction cost is higher. Double wall framing requires more lumber. The wall thickness is greater, reducing interior floor space. But the fuel savings justify the investment. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, an R19 wall loses approximately 5,800 British thermal units per hour per 100 square feet. An R40 wall loses roughly 2,750 British thermal units per hour. The difference is 3,050 British thermal units per hour. A typical 480 square foot cabin with 320 square feet of exterior wall saves 234,240 British thermal units daily. Paper birch delivers roughly 33,000 British thermal units per pound. The improved insulation saves roughly 7 pounds of firewood per day. Over a 180-day winter, that is 1,260 pounds, more than half a cord. The homesteader who builds R40 walls spends 1 month less per winter felling, hauling, splitting, and stacking. Spray foam insulation offers another solution at R6.5 per inch. Closed-cell spray foam acts as both insulation and a vapor barrier. It seals rim joists and irregular cavities where air leaks commonly occur. Log construction, traditional but thermally inefficient, provides only R1.4 per inch. An 8-inch log wall achieves roughly R11. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, this is catastrophic. Maintaining 70 degrees Fahrenheit indoors with R11 walls requires burning nearly 3 times as much wood as an R40 cabin. To make log construction viable at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the cabin requires either external insulation cladding or a massive masonry heater. Even then, the fuel cost remains significantly higher. Log cabins are built for aesthetics and tradition, not thermal performance. A standard metal wood stove radiates heat when the fire is burning. The steel firebox heats to 500 to 700 degrees Fahrenheit and warms the room quickly. But the moment the fire dies, the thin steel cools within minutes. The room temperature drops. You must wake up at 2 a.m. to reload the stove or accept a 50 degrees Fahrenheit cabin by morning. A masonry heater solves this with thermal mass. The heater weighs 2,000 to 6,000 pounds of stone, brick, or concrete. The firebox is small and designed for very hot, fast burns. You load the firebox with dry wood and burn it intensely for 1 to 2 hours, achieving combustion temperatures above 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The exhaust gases do not vent directly up a chimney. They pass through a series of baffling channels inside the masonry mass. As the hot gases snake through these channels, they transfer heat to the stone. The stone absorbs this thermal energy and stores it. After the fire goes out, the stone continues to radiate heat for 12 to 24 hours. The surface temperature of the masonry stays around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, warm to the touch but not dangerously hot. This gentle, sustained radiation maintains a stable indoor temperature without requiring constant fire tending. You burn twice a day, morning and evening. The rest of the time, the stored heat carries you. Modern forced air furnaces require continuous fuel input and electricity to circulate air. The masonry heater is a thermal battery. You charge it with a short, intense fire. It discharges slowly over 24 hours. Your labor chopping and hauling wood is converted into stored time. You work once, and the heater keeps you warm while you sleep. For homesteaders using standard metal stoves, Overnight survival requires banking the fire. The goal is to keep a fire alive for 8 or more hours without adding fuel. First, you rake the hot coals to the front of the firebox near the air intake. Coals are pure carbon and burn slowly. Concentrating them near the intake ensures they receive the small amount of oxygen you will allow through the damper. Next, you pack the firebox tightly with large unsplit rounds. Splitting wood increases surface area and accelerates combustion. Unsplit rounds burn as slowly as possible. You load them east-west, parallel to the door. This prevents air from rushing down the length of the logs, which would create a tunnel effect and speed up the burn. Wood must be seasoned to less than 20% moisture content. Burning green wood wastes 15 to 20% of the energy just boiling off water as steam rather than heating the room. Finally, you shut the damper down to 10 to 15% airflow. This starves the fire of oxygen, forcing it into a slow smolder. The coals generate just enough heat to sustain combustion in the unsplit rounds without flaring into a full burn. The firebox stays warm. The cabin stays warm. You sleep uninterrupted. Slow, oxygen-starved fires produce cool smoke. Cool smoke condenses on the inner walls of the chimney as creosote, a tarry substance that is highly flammable. If it builds up to a 1/4-inch thickness and is ignited by a spark, it causes a chimney fire, a roaring, uncontrollable blaze inside the flue that can crack the chimney liner or ignite the roof. Banking the fire is a calculated risk. You trade overnight warmth for the need to clean the chimney frequently and monitor for creosote buildup. At -40°F, sweat is catastrophic. Water conducts heat 25 times faster than air. Dry insulation traps dead air in thousands of small pockets. Air is a poor conductor of heat. When moisture saturates the insulation, it displaces the air. Water fills the pockets. Heat conducts through the water 25 times faster. The insulation collapses. Sweating through your base layer during wood chopping creates heat extraction the moment you stop moving. While you are active, your body generates 400 to 600 watts of metabolic heat. The instant you stop, heat generation drops to basal metabolic rate, roughly 80 to 100 watts. The wet fabric continues extracting heat at the elevated rate. Core temperature begins to drop. Shivering starts within minutes. Protocol: be bold, start cold. Strip down to base layers before you start sweating. If you begin a heavy chore like splitting wood while wearing your insulated mid-layer, you will overheat within 5 minutes. Sweat will saturate your base layer. When you finish the chore, the wet base layer will cool you catastrophically. Instead, you start the chore in only your base layer and shell. You feel cold for the first 2 minutes, then metabolic heat builds. You warm up, you finish the chore, your base layer is dry, you add the mid-layer and move to the next task without a thermal crisis. Ventilation zippers in the armpits and along the torso allow moisture to escape without removing the shell layer. If you wet your base layer despite ventilation, you must stop and change immediately. Hypothermia onset can occur in under 30 minutes if wind is present. The layering system is body envelope engineering. Base layer, merino wool, or synthetic fabric that wicks moisture away from the skin. Cotton absorbs water and loses all insulation value. A cotton t-shirt soaked with sweat at -40°F will freeze solid within minutes of stopping activity. Merino wool fiber has a hydrophilic core that absorbs moisture and a hydrophobic surface that repels it. The fiber can absorb up to 30% of its weight in moisture, while the outer surface remains dry to the touch. The wool continues to insulate even when damp because the fiber structure maintains some dead air space. Mid-layer, high loft fleece, or down, that creates dead air space to trap body heat. Down has a superior warmth-to-weight ratio but loses all insulation when wet. Fleece retains some insulation even when damp. Shell layer, Gore-Tex or tight weave canvas that stops wind from stripping away the warm air bubble trapped by the mid-layer. At -40°F with a 20-mile-per-hour wind, exposed skin loses heat at the same rate it would at -70°F in still air. The shell layer blocks wind, preventing convective heat loss. Each layer has a mechanical function. The base layer manages moisture. The mid-layer traps heat. The shell layer blocks convection. Cordless tool batteries must be kept inside your parka against body heat until the moment of use. Lithium-ion batteries lose capacity exponentially as temperature drops. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, a fully charged battery may deliver less than 10% of its rated capacity. Lithium iron phosphate batteries cannot be charged below freezing without permanent damage to the anode. Lithium plating occurs, causing internal short circuits. Keeping the battery against your body at 98 degrees Fahrenheit maintains electrochemical activity. At -40 degrees Fahrenheit, after a 4-hour cold soak, engine blocks reach ambient temperature. Standard 10W30 motor oil becomes molasses. The oil cannot flow through the engine's oil passages. When you attempt to start the engine, the starter tries to turn the crankshaft through thick, sludgy oil. If the engine does turn over, it runs dry for several seconds before oil pressure builds. Metal grinds on metal. Synthetic 0W40 oil remains fluid at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Engines using synthetic oil start cleanly and suffer no damage. Chainsaws and batteries are brought inside the cabin at night. Generators left outside may need a propane torch applied carefully to the oil pan just to warm the oil enough for the starter to turn the engine. Lead-acid batteries have roughly zero usable capacity at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. If the battery is discharged below 50% in freezing temperatures, the electrolyte becomes mostly water. Water freezes. The ice expands, cracking the internal plates and rupturing the case. Plastic intake manifolds, wiring insulation, and steel tool handles become glass-like and brittle. A plastic chainsaw housing that can survive being dropped at 70 degrees Fahrenheit will shatter at -40 degrees Fahrenheit. You cannot rip a starter cord. You must pull gently to cycle the piston, warm the oil frictionally through several slow pulls, then pull to start. A frozen steel axe head hitting frozen spruce can chip or shatter. The steel loses ductility. Tools must be warmed before use or swung with controlled force. Equipment does not just slow down in extreme cold, it fundamentally changes material properties. In a grid-dependent home at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, the failure timeline is predictable. Hours 0 to 4, the house retains residual heat. The insulation and thermal mass of the structure hold the interior temperature near 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Hours 4 to 12, the temperature drops steadily. With no active heat input and R19 walls leaking heat through the 110 degrees Fahrenheit gradient, the interior temperature falls to freezing. Water pipes in exterior walls begin to freeze. If the pipes are copper or PVC, the expanding ice cracks them. Hours 12 to 24, the house becomes uninhabitable. Interior temperature drops below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Frozen pipes burst when they thaw, flooding the structure. Residents must evacuate or risk hypothermia. The same scenario in an off-grid cabin. The homesteader notices the inverter has gone silent. The battery bank has drained or the generator has failed. Lighting switches from electric bulbs to candles or oil lamps. The wood stove does not require electricity, it burns passively. The homesteader throws another log into the firebox. The cabin stays warm. Water is not pumped from a pressurized line. It is stored in 55-gallon drums inside the heated envelope or hauled manually from an ice hole cut through 3 feet of lake ice. The ice hole must be chipped out daily. If neglected for 48 hours at -40 degrees Fahrenheit, it requires reaugering with a gas-powered auger, a massive caloric expenditure. The composting toilet requires no water pressure or sewage line. Sanitation continues. The cabin's life support systems are decoupled. The loss of electricity is an inconvenience, not a collapse. Modern homes optimize for comfort and assume a continuous supply. Off-grid cabins optimize for resilience and assume failure. Modern infrastructure works beautifully when the grid is live, the supply chain is intact, and the weather stays within design parameters. But efficiency under normal conditions is fragile under stress. A just-in-time grocery system collapses when trucks stop running. A centralized power grid fails when demand spikes or generation drops. A forced air furnace stops heating when the electricity cuts off. The Alaskan off-grid cabin is not more comfortable than a modern home. It is colder in the morning before the fire is stoked. It requires hauling 125 pounds of water through snow. It demands 4,500 calories per day of physical labor, but it does not collapse. The systems are decoupled, passive, and designed around the assumption of failure. The wood stove burns without electricity. The water flows by gravity or muscle. The thermal mass holds heat through the night. Resilience has a cost, and that cost is paid in advance through labor and design, not after the fact through emergency response. The homesteader splitting wood in August is building a thermal battery that will sustain them when the temperature drops to -40 degrees Fahrenheit and the sun does not rise for 20 hours. The grid-dependent homeowner trusts the system to function. The off-grid homesteader trusts the physics of retention, the BTUS in a cord of birch, and the R value of a properly sealed wall.